much less, like 3 times less. So I think it's because we haven't been keeping consistent so far. So we're gonna try to keep it more consistent next time. Just a few updates on JS JavaScript scenes in Malaysia. Recently we have met with this person, Caesar. It's from Taiwan, right? So he organized JSDC Taiwan, JavaScript Developer Conference of Taiwan. So soon we'll be partnering with them to bring JSDC to Malaysia.
Wow.
So in case you guys didn't know, JSDC is in its 4th year now. Yeah, it's 4th year now. Every year there's about like a few thousand people joining. It's kind of like the size of MSDC, somewhat similar, right? So we are making ways and doing a partnership with JSDC. They will supply us speakers and information, sponsors and all that. Soon, hopefully by next year, right? Hopefully by next year we'll be able to launch a developers conference for JavaScript in Malaysia, JSDC.MY or something similar.
Nice.
We're gonna do it in Malaysia, so it's gonna be massive.
Yeah.
So this year we're gonna start to build out meetups like this. We're gonna organize regular meetups every month. Like just come here and hang out, talk about stuff. We don't have to talk about JavaScript. We talk about coffee if you want to. Kill coffee scripts. Yeah, anything. Yeah.
Make you sour.
Yeah, the idea is to get more people from the tech scenes to meet up. We have Level Up. Have you guys been to Level Up before?
Yeah. Webcam.
Webcam Level Up for those events that they organize. We're trying to do something similar, complimentary events. So try to bring the tech scenes closer together, right? So hopefully next meetup we have more people. It's okay. This meetup, less people, less pressure for our speaker here. So a bit of introduction. This place is Nokia. This place is the office of Nokia. So this is our cool area, and usually we have parties every now and then because we work with like music professionals. Our goal is to get music professionals to connect with people that organize shows and venues and all that. So if you're a DJ, then you'll be one of our target audiences. Connect to people that will give you shows. So this is what we're doing. We're actually covering a lot of markets in overseas. We started our business in Western Europe, and we're doing the same for Malaysia's music scenes as well. So this October, we're launching our app. This is our office cat. 2 office cats is one of them. This October, we're launching our first app, which will be Tinder. It works kind of like Tinder for the music industry, right? Yeah, this one. This one. So it looks something like this, kind of like the OkCupid / Tinder for the music industry, right? And my name is Ruben. I'm the CTO of Nokia. Basically, I'm a cat hero. The cat's my friend. And again, Eugene is one of our senior engineers. He's the main organizer of today's event, but he doesn't want to talk to you guys because he's shy. Yeah. So there you go. This guy, thanks for promoting. So I'm gonna need you guys to help me a little bit. Help us to spread the news to your friends or to your colleagues, especially those companies. If you're working in a company that uses JavaScript as a backend technology, either Node.js or Angular or React, anything that's related to JavaScript, right? Get your colleagues to join us as well. Get colleagues to join in, because I personally feel like we have to improve the JavaScript scenes in Malaysia. The JavaScript scenes in Malaysia can be somewhat traditional, considering the fact that nowadays we move on to ES6, ECMAScript 6, ES7 is on the way, it's on the horizon, right? So, but we're still stuck with jQuery era. I kid you not, I actually interviewed a university lecturer that teaches programming that can't differentiate jQuery from JavaScript. He says he knows jQuery, but we asked him to do JavaScript, he says, I'm not sure about JavaScript and stuff like that. So this can't happen in Malaysia, right? We gotta be the ones to push the technology forward. We gotta be the ones to improve the adoption of best practices in JavaScript world. And JavaScript is very easy to use. It's everywhere. Any website, anything that's related to web technology, somehow, somewhere, you have to touch JavaScript. There's no running away from it, right? So this is what we're trying to do. This is our vision, to bring you guys together. So help us spread the word. Let's try to get back glorious days of the first JavaScript meetup we did last time, 3 months ago. Alright? So, Eugene. Alright, so you ready? Sure. Alright, so we're going to start with our first speaker, Sebastian.
Hi.
Hi guys. Could you give a bit of a background?
So, hi everyone. I like that this is like a totally cozy environment after this discussion. I don't really do a lot of talks. I just love JavaScript and coding, and I love JavaScript engineers. I like KL too. So I actually drove up today from Singapore. I used to live in KL like 9 years ago. My God, it's been a long time. And at the time, I knew no one here, other than like an ex-girlfriend. I'm sorry.
Still very sweet twilight. I'm sorry.
So yeah, I work with startups in Singapore. I'm a freelance front-end engineer. It's a lot of fun over there, but I feel like I wanted to see what's going on here, because once in a while there's like these ridiculous stories like a Grab taxi comes to Singapore and they have hundreds of millions of dollars and they come from KL. And you're like, what? How did that even? So I'm like, what's going on? There must be some really cool engineers here, and I'm really glad to be here tonight, meeting you all. And that's really what I wanted to do. Just hang out here for an evening and get to know some cool people. And at some point maybe like collaborate and do awesome stuff together. There's a lot of people like in Singapore too doing JavaScript. I help run one of the meetups there. That's specifically for front-end development. It also doesn't have any talks, so mostly just people show up and do random coding. It's really easy, but very stress-free, and that's why I like this vibe. But yeah, like tonight I'll present a little bit of the work that I've been doing in the last couple of months. I've actually been doing JavaScript, and somebody was asking me today. I think it's probably like 15 years or something, but I kind of realized that it means nothing how many years you've done JavaScript, because all the stuff that I do these days is stuff that I wasn't doing even 1 year ago. So I think if you're getting into JavaScript or you're coming from other languages into JavaScript today, in about 6 months you learn everything that it takes to be like, at the state of the art to like, in 6 months from now. Which will again be different from today. So it's a really cool time, like you were saying, to do JavaScript now, because ES6 is coming out. There's all these new standards in the browser, and the browser actually, guess what, implementing them, and if they're not, then polyfills are pushing along.
Yes.
So
Maple, polyfills.
JavaScript is everywhere. We were just talking like there's React Native. You can build like native apps for like crappy platforms that don't support JavaScript themselves. I'm working on putting JavaScript into my motorcycle. I've got a Raspberry Pi and an Arduino running in there, controlling some stupid flashing LEDs. Everything needs to be JavaScript, right? I'm still trying to talk to the onboard network, but that's another problem. I've been doing a 6-month freelance project with this company, and I don't want to promote too much, but sort of give you the background what it's about. There's a company called Bigme in Singapore. They've been around since forever, and they have a web app. They have like mobile apps and stuff, but they wanted to have a web app. So a couple of years ago, they started like a whole effort to set this up, and they had a whole PHP thing and an Ajax backbone, ES5 with some TypeScript kind of code base. Sort of the team sort of like most of them sort of left and moved on to better things, So I joined them in January to see what we could do with that code base, and I was like, throw up my hands, like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't touch PHP and all that stuff, so I sort of spent 3 or 4 months just coding whatever I wanted to code, which was basically like I wanted to get into ES6, I wanted to do web components because I always keep hearing about it, and I wanted to get into better ways of using like things that are on NPM. Because if you're doing JavaScript, NPM is the shit. All right, like have you ever seen that graph where like NPM versus other languages package management? Like NPM just blows it all away, right? There's so much good stuff on there. So to use it, I was really hoping to use this thing called JSPM. I don't know if anyone come across JSPM yet? Yeah? Okay, so it's a really nice idea. Oh, hang on, I lost the connection there. 1 second. Apologies. Magic. Yes. There we go. All right, so JSPM is it promises to give you ES6 language support with package management from basically NPM, but also just straight off GitHub. So if you publish, you don't have to have the NPM overhead. And it does that through this thing called the system.js module loader thingy. It's all, anyway, long story short, I spent many weeks working on this, found out it's totally experimental. It was costing me so much time. And I was like, I'm never going to ship anything if I keep going with this. So then I switched to Webpack for like an hour or something, and I like rage quit, and then I switched to Browserify, and in 15 minutes I had my app running. So I was like, happy. So I'm not dissing Webpack. I'm saying this is really experimental. I'm saying I rage easily. Webpack is just as good. You can totally use that. But I just wanted to show a project that I was doing that happens to use Browserify now. Browserify, okay, who knows what Browserify is? Right? Okay, well, I'll give you a quick, how much time do I have, by the way? Because I could go on for days.
Yeah, you can go on.
No, there's other people.
1 hour.
Really?
Help yourself out. Have fun.
Okay.
Browserify,
So Browserify is this really awesome tool that transpiles JavaScript into JavaScript, but in doing so, it takes all the calls to require, like in Node, using Node, and this thing called require, which doesn't exist in the browser. And the problem is that it's a synchronous call, so it expects something to return right immediately. But the thing that you're returning is actually something that gets loaded off the disk, so this is totally impossible. Right? So Node does a whole bunch of magic to make that happen. And if you want to do this in the browser, because it's super useful to use NPM modules, then you need to use a tool like Webpack or Browserify or JSPM that will basically turn your JavaScript file into like this massive blob of JavaScript where all these modules are like sort of inlined and then happen to exist synchronously, so that when you call require, your code is just like calling something that was already created beforehand. So it's basically let's use NPM in the browser. Anyway, now with Browserify, I wanted to use this because I have been building too many apps, like too many web apps over the years with Backbone, and I realized that I hate frameworks now. So I didn't want to get into like Ember or Angular 2 or whatever the flavor du jour is. And I wanted to like pursue this idea of having all these little components on NPM that you just pick and choose whatever you like. And I sort of gave this a shot. Obviously Browserify, fantastic for that. Also, I've been trying to do this with my own code. So my own applications, every time they get too complicated, they do too many things, I break them up. So I kind of look at the application as a fractal, so that the more you zoom in, the more you see complexity, you keep splitting it up into smaller chunks, and publish them all into NPM. NPM has sort of become my new .com, because I run out of names to call things registered on NPM. Things are a problem, so I need to look at like scope NPM and stuff. But anyway, for this project, it's a fun application. It was meant to be a chat widget. So think of like Facebook Messenger that you can drop onto any website, right? Now, we didn't build the whole thing. I only spent like a couple of months experimenting with technology, really, and actually kind of ignoring the actual product, because it was more like, testing and building out a whole new stack for the company to work on. So it's not very visually impressive at all. I didn't even work with any designer on this, because it was just more technical proof of concept. Anyway, I think I have it open. So, a company called Migni, and we use we call everything, we named everything after beach. So there's a part called beach ball. There's another one called surfboard. Hang on, where is it? Yes. Oh, we have amazing design interns. So I asked them to be cool things like that. So surfboard is the widget. So this is what you can think of as the application itself. So if you're building a web app, you usually have something like app.js or whatever, and then you ship that. So the difference with this application is it's meant to ship onto third-party sites, or it should be. The idea is that you can just drop this script tag into any page, like the same that you do with like Google Analytics, for example. So it's sort of a self-contained JavaScript blob that hooks into an existing website, overlays it with a big UI, and then sort of everything takes over from there. Yeah, I mean, but we did other stuff, so like you can also do this. Sorry, should I use ES6 or? I'm going to use ES6. Okay. So this is awesome. If you're not using it, you probably should. Oh, by the way, if you're not using it, just now I was showing that. Here, Babel, check it out. It's really awesome. I'll probably get into that later. Anyway, so the code base. Yeah, surfboard. So this application is what I wanted to show for web components. So sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but that's how it goes. Web components. Yeah, perfect. Web components are basically a bunch of different technologies. So there's four parts to web components. 2 of them suck and 2 of them are awesome. This is my opinion, right? So from my experience, there's a thing called custom elements. There's HTML imports, HTML templates, and shadow DOM. And so to give you an understanding, right? So custom elements is really, you can create like your own HTML tags now. That means not just like you can always create, you can always put like an HTML tag in the page and the browser will sort of ignore it. Now what you can do is you can give that tag your own custom properties, your own methods, all kinds of like you can give your own custom events and stuff like that. And it's like legitimate. It's not just like your browser is ignoring your crappy code. It's like there's an API for all these things.
Is it similar to Angular's directory?
Yes. So the reason for web components is because all these frameworks keep reinventing that same thing in slightly different ways. And the same way that ES6 has things like classes and other ways that basically standardize things that every framework keeps reinventing, right? Web components is basically sort of like a standardized version of what every a React class or in Angular you have the same thing. In fact, when you have views, so there's now just a standard way to do that. And what better way than just making it an HTML element, right? So HTML elements.
Is there a repository for this thing?
Oh yeah, sure. It's on my GitHub. Go to yeah. Alright. So if you go to CBAS, that's my GitHub username. There's not much content there. It's just this presentation, right? So yeah. So custom elements. I'll probably add more to this later. HTML elements, custom elements is really awesome. HTML imports, I don't find it useful. It's basically like kind of do a link tag to a style sheet. You can add it to an HTML page, and then it'll import all of that HTML content, which could itself include CSS and JavaScript. It'll import all of that into your page. So the idea is that you create a custom element, and you use like a document that register element, right? Register element will make that element will make that JavaScript class the implementation of that element. When the browser sees you using that custom tag in your code, it will actually invoke the instance of instantiate your class, and then you go through this entire lifecycle. Does that sort of make sense? Okay. So HTML imports I haven't really found use at all, because if you're using like Webpack or Browserify or some of these things, you're basically already doing the importing thing yourself. And there's a whole bunch of complications with imports. I'm not going to get into too much of it now, but I basically just totally ignored this because I couldn't figure out how to use it when you, for example, I'll give you a small example. Like if you're doing things where you're using like, let's say you use Lodash, okay, in your application, and you have like 15 different web components, and they all use Lodash. It's really hard to get all of the custom HTML imports for each of the components to use that same that same version of Lodash, and you end up like distributing 15 times the amount of code for your dependencies. So that was really hard to solve. So I didn't really use that. HTML templates. So yeah, it's, you know, like it's basically what you do with templates for like underscore, let's say, or handlebars. You put like a script tag with type, typically like type text slash HTML or text slash handlebars or some hack like that, which is kind of like you're fudging, so the browser kind of ignores your script, but it's still in there. It's like this inert blob. You put it into an HTML comment and have your own thing around it. There's all kinds of hacks like that. So they kind of standardize it, and now there's this tag and anything within it gets totally ignored by the browser. Which sounds not really useful, but when you think of templates, you're really thinking like handlebars or whatever. They'll give you like iterators and like, you know, two-way binding with Angular and all this kind of fancy stuff. And so this offers none of that. And what I'm seeing, what like some frameworks do is like sort of like add that into HTML templates itself, but it's like it doesn't feel like that's what standard is for. The standard is just like these inert blobs that aren't supposed to have any kind of. Yeah. So this is also I specifically mean the framework called Polymer. Anyone here ever seen Polymer, heard of Polymer, or used Polymer? Okay. So there's so this is by Google, and Google is kind of like one of the big entities pushing web components, and to make it happen, they created a framework that uses web components to show what you can do with it. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but they kind of make the framework really frameworky, and you're not actually using web components anymore. You're just using something that resembles web components, but you might as well be using Angular 2 or Ember or whatever. So it's or React. So it's I like that they did this, mostly because they came out with a really cool polyfill for web components called web components.js. And so you can get this as a standalone. So if you're using web components in your browser, and like if you're not using Chrome, then your browser won't support web components natively, or not all of it, or some of it in a different version of the standard. Then if you use this thing called web components.js, then yeah, it has these polyfills that you can install them, and you're off. You load them in your browser, and it's just magically makes everything work. And it's really, really good. It's really well tested. It supports all kinds of browsers. So across IE, Safari. I've never had, like, I haven't really had any issues with actually using this color, this polyfill. Now, so HTML imports, I didn't find it too useful. Now, HTML templates, same thing. The last one is Shadow DOM, and that is the best thing ever. So the Shadow DOM, has anyone used that before? Or heard of it before? Okay, so Shadow DOM is, you can think of it sort of as, I was trying to make an analogy, like it's like an iframe within your element, in a way. So it gives you a little DOM fragment, a document fragment, within an element. And that means you can do all kinds of secret stuff, and it's completely encapsulated within the element. And to the actual DOM, to the actual tree, the DOM tree of that document that you're in, if you're, like, let's say, doing a query selector through the DOM, right? It won't match anything within your custom element. So you can create all kinds of, like, you can get a whole little subtree in there, and all kinds of crazy stuff in there. And if somebody like creates an instance of your tag with just that tag name, like if I call like my-element, and they put that as an HTML tag into their content, the browser will create that tag, will create all that stuff within it, and you can be loading content. You can be executing JavaScript in there, you can have your own CSS in there, and you can have your own like HTML content there. And none of that will be visible to any higher level. It's really, really cool. Because it totally encapsulates everything. And that's sort of what all these frameworks tend to do. That's but they always struggle with CSS. So no matter how much your JavaScript is all encapsulated, including the namespace and whatever, your CSS is going to end up being this like one gigantic file where you end up using like huge prefixes and using ugly ass notations like EVM or whatever, or you end up with like these like tiered selectors that go on like 12 stages or whatever. You don't have to do that anymore. Nowadays, I'll show you what a component looks like. So here's my app, right? Let's go. So this is not a web app in the sense that it's not a single page app. This is a remember this is a JavaScript law that you could inject into other pages, right? So the starting point is not index.html, it's actually index.js.
Can you increase the font size?
Oh, my bad. Thanks. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So here, my entry point, I'm going to use Babel because I want to use ES6. And then I'm just going to jump into my app main, which is basically my entry point to my real code, right? So this part is just, this is a little ES6 file. It's going to, a browser file it's going to read. But because I'm invoking Babel here, everything else is ES6. So sorry, this one's ES5, everything else is ES6. So app name, in the app folder, I have a main.js. And here I'm loading the web components.js shim. I'm also using a thing called DOM4, which gives you a couple of small helper utilities. Polyclose that. It's like it's stuff that's I don't think in any browser, but it's kind of useful. Basically like a little bit of jQuery helper style. DOM ready. I'm only using that here, and then maybe that's the actual custom. That's the first custom element I'm creating here. And it's in my components folder. So if I look into that, you can see here all I'm doing is instantiating this component and appending it to the. So this is as if I'm doing in the page. This. Basically, that's all I'm doing essentially here, and attaching that into the body. So and it's 100% equivalent. So as soon as this component is registered in the document, I can actually do that as HTML, which is really kind of cool. Because I can use that inside things like templates, right? It's a really nice way to compose components together. Now, if I look at the make-me component here, oh yeah, I'm using a little trick. So instead of like index.js, I do this, I package JSON. I don't know if everyone's seen that. That's like from React. I stole that. So here's what that code looks like. This is how I create a custom element. So I extend from HTML element. So HTML element is a primitive that exists in the browser in DOM. And if I extend from it, I'm basically creating an object that has a prototype that links up to HTML element. So when you're doing a class in ES6, it's the same as if you're doing ES5 style, where you're like attaching stuff to the prototype. This is just exactly true, essentially. The interesting bit though is I'm not using a constructor, and this is something where there's different proposals. There's like 4 or 5 different proposals for custom elements, and I'm just using the one that the web component.js shim supports, the one that Chrome supports natively. But this is still something that's it's experimental, so this might change. It might fix these things. Just be aware of that. So in this, instead of using a constructor function, I'm actually using this creative callback. Now there's a creative callback. There's one that you attach the element to the DOM, and then there's one where you detach the element. Maybe there's like a destructive or something. I forgot. There's 4. There's one where you like create the element like in memory, one where you stick it into the DOM, one where you remove from the DOM, and then one where you completely destroy it. So that's basically your life cycle. So React has something very similar. If you're familiar with that, we'll recognize this pattern. So it's a really nice way to code, and you can kind of feel like if you're using React today, or if you're using other frameworks like that today, you can see sort of like they're all going to head towards this direction. The web components is a nice way to sort of evolve what you're having today. Now, how I'm working with this now? Like how am I doing templates? Where's my HTML coming from? Where's my JavaScript? Where's my CSS? So you might create a callback, which is when the element gets instantiated. I'm doing a couple of things here which aren't too relevant right now. The first important thing that I'm doing here is I'm creating a shadow root on this HTML element. So the shadow root exists at the same time as like its own. So there's a shadow DOM and there's also a light DOM. So the standard DOM is basically called a light DOM. When you create a shadow root, you're not going to see any more content that's within the tag. So if I have this tag. Let's say I put like close enough. Okay, if I put hello world in there, then I'm not going to see that. I'm going to see that until I create a shadow root. Because as soon as I create a shadow root, this whole thing will be gone, right? And then somewhere else, when I create a shadow root, I can then append the HTML to the shadow root, which will appear instead of where that tag actually placed in the root DOM. So it's good. Sometimes it kind of messes with your head when you're like traversing the shadow boundary. So that's generally not something you want to do too much. And the whole point of this encapsulation is that you don't cross the shadow boundary, so you don't care about what's outside. Right.
You have to keep all of this in your head.
Okay. Well, the encapsulation means that you don't want to keep any head. But how I structure the application itself, I do that with I use events on the custom element to sort of talk to other sort of, how do I say it? Instead of a router, normally you have an app like a singleton, like a global singleton, that has a router, and whenever like different parts of the application talk to each other, they tend to do it through a router or like an event bus on the app. So because I'm not like in the JavaScript pure world now, I'm dealing with like instances of HTML elements in the DOM. I figured that I might be able to do that by bubbling events up the DOM. And normally events on like a link tag, let's say you click on a link tag, that bubbles all the way up, and if you capture it, you can use things like jQuery $.live or $.whatever. That works 100% with custom elements as well. My issue was like sorry, I'll probably find it. Now, anyway, yeah. So getting back to the HTML bit, right? I basically have my shadow root, and I can use this insert CSS thing by Substack to just take a string of CSS. The string of CSS comes from this stylus file, which I'm just including, right? Which is like a required call. Import is basically like a required node. So I'm just like pulling this file in as a string, and this file is actually getting transpiled by browser file. So this is using stylus. If you're familiar with stylus, it's like a CSS preprocessor. So consider it as CSS, like if you're using less or SAS, it's the same thing. Stylus is just one that works in Node as well. And this is basically CSS and a string. And what I'm doing then is insert CSS, I'm creating a style tag, and it's just like doing inner text with this CSS string. So I'm basically creating inside this inside right here. I'm basically creating, and then going a color red, whatever. Right. So this is now what my primary looks like. This is inside my shadow.
DOM.
So all this stuff is just CSS that gets delivered into this package. So that means now this will only affect the links that exist within this DOM fragment. So only the stuff that's like this is not going to touch any like anchors out like in the third-party application or anywhere else in other components, which is really cool. Also, it's not going to affect any custom elements inside this custom element. So if I have another one here that's called so if this big panel has an anchor, it's not going to be read automatically because it's CSS. So it's totally encapsulated, and what that means is now your CSS is no longer these like massive selectors, and you have to be very careful about overriding everyone else. No one is going to override you, so you can safely include third-party CSS, and your CSS ends up being really, really simple. So I think that pulled up some examples like, I can do horrific things like just take articles to flex, right? Like if you normally do that in like an application, that will break everything, right? I can just style all buttons because I know that in this component I only have like one button. So this is what I mean. You don't have to keep thinking like almost anything in your head. Everything is like tiny little components. So my HTML I'm using J for this transpile to HTML, and I think it's self-explanatory. Basically, this is like a button tag with a text cancel, right? So my HTML becomes extremely simple for each component. So I never have to keep the whole thing in my head. When I'm putting CSS for this component, I can write things that just target whatever's here, and I'm guaranteed because of the shadow DOM that it will not affect anything outside of it. So my CSS is really simple, my HTML is super simple, and my JavaScript is only concerning things that happen in this component level. So it's really quite nice. So to give you sort of, maybe I'll show what it actually looks like. Pretty useful. Oh yeah, I'm using Karma for testing. That's also how I develop on this project. Start. So I'm going to build Browser.MY is going to package the whole thing up. It's going to spin up sort of an independent browser, and it's going to run my tests in the background. So it's running all my tests now. See coverage going on here. So apparently, so all my tests are successful. If I want to see the actual thing, the actual app, this is the app. So this is the main dash meet reply. And if I inspect this guy here, you'll see that the DOM itself only has body and then a bunch of stuff from Karma. This is like not my photos. Okay, and here we go. This is the only tag that we have. Does that show up at all? Right. So the meet tag is the only thing that's in there. Now, in the DevTools, you can see that it has a shadow root, right? So it actually has a whole bunch of stuff inside that, but to the DOM, like at the top level of the application, it doesn't exist. Only once I look into it and start inspecting inside the shadow root, I can see that, okay, there's two other tags in there. So one is a bunch of CSS, so like Browser.MY automatically injected that there now. And the other one is this button. So again, this CSS only affects, can only possibly affect stuff in the shadow root, which is only that big button tag. If I look inside the big button, there's another shadow root there. So you start seeing how this, you can compose these things together, and it's a whole different way of building things. But in a standard way. This is not like some crazy framework. This is actually just a standard. Same thing here. I did the same work. Right. I inject a bunch of CSS. That basically only affects this button, which has a text maybe compiling probably with CSS. Right. And I'm putting an SVG inside the button. So that's the inside the button. So an SVG that's combining there. So I don't think it does anything else for Meltdown. So probably click handler would create this bunch of HTML. Yeah. Hang on. So yeah, so this is the click handler is where I'm starting to use this event bubbling. I found it really useful to use the event target interface. So if you've not heard of event target, you probably already use it because it's basically just add event listener, remove event listener, and dispatch event. And this is so that every HTML thing uses. And rather than using like event emitter 2 or backbone events or every framework has its own event emitter, management stuff. I just figured like why don't I try using the W3C stuff that's like 20 years old and won't use since forever. I found that worked really, really well, especially with custom elements, because they all inherit from the HTML element, which already has those interfaces implemented. And they do the bubbling stuff magically, like for you. Bubbling is actually quite tricky. You have to figure out what is your parent node, and then figure out single event there. And they do things with custom elements. They actually do things like they sort of like what do they call it again? It's basically they take the event and when you look at the source element, I think it's called the source element, where the event originated. As soon as it traverses the shadow boundary, it will actually sort of like change that source element to be the custom element rather than the actual element inside the shadow DOM. So there's all kinds of trickery, and that's really useful to not have to reinvent. It gets a bit weirder when you're using. I was building a library as a partner to this, and inside that was vanilla JavaScript, and inside that I wanted to use the same event target thing, so I had to just use some polyfills for that. I create some polyfills that you can basically extend from. But anyway, hang on, let me see how. So we have our key element, then we have the button element. So this one's really straightforward. We create our shadow root, then we inject our template by calling the HTML that we imported from our data file. We then do the same thing. We inject our CSS that we imported from the stylus file. And then the only thing that we do here, we set up our event handling, so like this thing only has one button, and if we click it, and we dispatch this event. This is really simple. This is the only interesting bit here, I guess. This pull-on. This is sort of an ES7 feature that Babel supports, but it's probably going to change. It's an experimental thing. It's not an ES6. It's not standardized yet. This really just all it does is it's the equivalent to
toggle.
Basically the same thing as that. So it's basically a binding. It's called function binding from ES7, and it's just sort of a little bit cleaner. You can do cool things like chaining functions that way. So I created a little shorthand. I think published that about a week. So this is like on and dispatch. Instead of like typing add event listener, remove event listener, I just create on and off and dispatch. Just like make my code a little bit shorter. So now that I have this this toggle thing, that's going to bubble up, right? So it's going to bubble back up to my me, and inside me, I can then listen for it. So here, I'm actually listening for that toggle event. So this becomes really easy to test also, because I can just trigger that event on this element and expect this reaction. So I don't care how like who clicked on it or where it came from exactly. I just care that this event reached this layer of the tree in the DOM. And when I do that, all I do is create a new maybe panel component or HTML element and inject that into the DOM. So this is actually standard DOM again. So this is like nothing specific about the components. This is like creating a new document of create element div and append as well, right? So basically this is how I invoked how I created the panel component, which again is the same pattern. So this is totally independent little package that starts from panel.js and it's its own template, it's its own file, and I adopted the same sort of pattern again and again. This actually turned out to be a really nice way to work, and I think you can actually create really complex applications, but keeping everything like nicely encapsulated. These are like just tiny little templates. Like, I found it really fun to work on this because you don't have to worry about breaking things. You can also test them. I don't know if I have I don't have tests for all of it yet. A lot of the stuff was like done as a proof of concept. And, sorry, I do keep it. This is a standard Mocha stuff, so it's not really web component specific. Does anyone, are you guys familiar with Mocha, Chai, Casino, that kind of stuff? So, get into this. Panel, right? So yeah, panel, the same stuff. So it'll dispatch the toggle event to turn it off again. This is how I did a router. So I wait for a navigate event. So anything can, because I couldn't use the URL, I couldn't do what's it called, push state. I couldn't do push state because I'm injecting my application, my component into another application, so I can't touch their URL. I have to create my own event, and then basically as the payload to the event, this is the view name essentially that I'm going to render. So this is like a 5-line router. So yeah, I mean, it basically it's just now it becomes recursive, right? So it's basically component after component after component. They're all like decoupled to the event, and your browser file is very easy to do. Just JS stylus or PostCSS or whatever syntax you want to use. Any questions so far? Has anyone tried React or something? How do they feel like it compares to this? Or other frameworks? Does this make sense? Would anyone consider using this? Any feedback on the actual standards?
Yeah, it feels nicer, I guess, because it's inline and instead of splitting definition files. Yeah, so that's nice personally. Nice part, I guess, that you can wire things here.
I was thinking of using React instead of doing the Jade templates. Actually, just using React within this. But I didn't go and set it up yet. You have to transpile the JSX stuff as well. I think that in theory, there's actually nothing that I guess prevents you from using virtual DOM inside of shadow DOM. I've just not tried it. It's basically like just another DOM that I can diff and do this thing, right?
I was wondering how well does the shadow DOM start with the scope CSS? How well does it work with Ethernet sort of? I'm pretty sure probably
I know, and it's I can't test it right now, but I was building most of this on Linux, so I did run it, and it actually magically works. Like the shim itself, it used to be called Platform.js because it really is like shipping a browser around. It like hijacks all the APIs. It'll hack like query selector and like filter out the things that you're not supposed to get back and stuff like that. So on CSS, it'll actually go in like namespace name.
does Ethernet sort of
No, it doesn't. No,
otherwise, it needs to modify the CSS as well.
Yeah. Okay. It's cool. So the same thing you can do with Angular 2. Okay. I haven't used that like for an application, but like from stuff that I was looking at, it's basically like you can tell it to like build it, and it'll basically like put all kinds of properties on all over the place to make it like magically work. So and then use source maps and stuff so that you don't have to care about it. Okay. Yeah. It's really an insane effort that they put into it.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, I just want to present some stuff. Okay.
All right, so let's give a big hand to. We're going to take a 5-minute break, like right now. There are snacks over there. There are if you're busy. Outside? Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Matt, and I'm the managing director of a company called Reddit Solutions. We specialize in mobile applications and web solutions. Don't really do websites, but anything a bit more complex than that. We do that kind of thing. So today I'm going to talk about JavaScript promises, not like what JavaScript promises us, but the actual thing called JavaScript promises, promise object, which is something that actually I'm quite fond of. I didn't realize that we were going to be so technical today, so I came up with slides, not code. Sorry about that. If you want to see some code on promises, I actually conducted a workshop 2 years ago, which is still valid now, and so I can share some code later on that. Anyway, let's get started, and I'm going to start with something scary. What are promises? What are JavaScript promises? And I'm quoting developer Mozilla. A promise represents a proxy for a value not necessarily known when the promise is created. It allows you to associate handlers to an asynchronous action, eventual success value or failure reason. That's a mouthful, and honestly, it's not very, nobody understands that. I'm not sure why they keep that on the website. I like to put it this way. Promises represent the outcome of an asynchronous action. Why is that important to us? I mean, we're all here to talk about JavaScript, and you all know that one of the great things about JavaScript is to be able to handle things asynchronously. And everybody talks about Node being single-threaded. It's not. It has a main thread, and then it has multiple other threads. So asynchronous is very, very important to us, people who use JavaScript, and that's what it is today. Now, usually when, I've conducted trainings on Angular, which ended up talking a lot about promises, and the reaction usually to promises as the outcome of an asynchronous action can be twofold. You have people who go, meh, don't care, so what? It represents the outcome of an asynchronous action, so what? And then you've got people who go, whoa, what the hell? How can you represent something that is asynchronous that hasn't happened yet? Okay, well, promises are neither. They're not scary, and they're not useless, as hopefully I will be able to show you today. So, a little bit of history about promises in the first place. They've been around for a long time. Back in the 90s, futures, but they've been revived basically, I mean, mostly because JavaScript came and, you know, lots of asynchronous stuff. They were actually implemented in jQuery. I had put poorly at the beginning. I changed it to differently. Yeah, they were implemented in jQuery, but not exactly in the way that they are now. Then came a lot of implementations, and people started having some libraries. Chris Cowell's Q is very famous. It's actually mostly the base for the future ES6 specification. Angular pushed it very much, and as I'm sure you know, Angular is getting a lot of traction. So $Q in Angular, which is based on Chris Cowell's Q. But there were a lot of implementations. But the great thing, and the reason why I'm so passionate about this topic, is that we don't really care what happened before. What we care about is promises are actually part of ES6. Okay, so whatever I'm going to talk about today, there's no doubt you're going to use it. Yeah, the moment, nobody can just stay and say, I'm not going to put in ES6. Yeah, nobody says that. And so that's why promises are going to be so interesting. So what do they do? What do promises actually do? Well, one thing that you very often read as the number one thing is they reduce indentation creep in asynchronous code. Any one of you codes in Node regularly? Yeah, right? So I'm sure you've had, you're doing something asynchronous. When that is done, you do a step 2 and then a step 3, and suddenly your code is moving towards the right instead of moving forward. So one thing that they allow is to streamline, to make it a lot more readable. But that to me is not really the most important thing. One thing that they really do is they make asynchronous flows easy to code, easy to debug, easy to test, and easy to understand as an external developer, as a code reviewer. Yeah, I mean, like, I see this on the left, it's still okay because it's pretty straightforward, but very quickly you're going to get lost. They allow for more reusable asynchronous components. They allow for state control in asynchronous flow. We talked now about events. Events do not really do state control. It's like an event is happening. It's not the state. So they allow for that. And well, a lot of people call promises the asynchronous try-catch. Because as we will see, it's basically what it is. You try to do something, there can be two outcomes, success, failure, nothing else. Okay? I put finally in bracket. Angular implements a finally, ES6 does not, because you actually don't really need it if you know how to use promises correctly. So you can see in every single one of those points, there's one word that always comes up, and that is asynchronous. So promises are all about controlling asynchronous flow. All right? Important features about promises. So a promise represents an outcome, but actually it kind of represents the action and the outcome. And with promises, there are only two possible outcomes, success or failure. All right? They are actually called resolve or reject. Resolve you'll sometimes see as fulfill, doesn't matter. Resolve or reject, but there are only two possible outcomes. Yeah? It sounds like a limitation, but it's actually a good thing. It helps your flow. Yeah? It helps you control your flow. They represent a single chance to decide an outcome. Okay? If something has happened and it was successful, don't try and come later and make it a failure. You can't. Not with promises. Okay? I'm not saying that you never want to do that. That would be wrong. But in the flows that I'm going to present to you, that's the kind of thing that we want. We don't want somebody, another part of the application, to suddenly decide, oh no, this is actually a failure. All right? So that's one good thing about promises. Single chance. Only one value. So the promises do not, as opposed to events, they don't allow to pass several values into their outcome. No big deal. This is JavaScript. You want several values, you take an array, or a dictionary, or an object, whatever you want. You can even pass functions to a promised outcome. It doesn't matter. But they are limited to one value. There's a reason for that, because that allows you to always be able to combine promises and know that you're still going to get one value. So you don't need to worry about, this event, does it give me one value or three, or how does it work? Always one value. So that's one important feature. Now, these things, as you can see, only one. Only two outcomes, only one chance, and only one value. So that's when you decide. However, on the other side of the spectrum, whoever is listening or using those promises, you can have as many handlers as you want. Okay? So it's not, one promise triggers one action. It can trigger as many as you want. Okay? So you can use .then, we'll briefly look at .then later. .then to say, what do I do on success? And then you can use .catch. Obviously, there's a reason why they picked that name, because it's like a try-catch. What do I do on failure? Okay, and one more thing, which again, I'm always going to compare a little bit with events. I'm not saying events are bad. They just serve a purpose, promises serve a different purpose. Handlers can be added at any time. You can't miss the outcome of a promise. You can miss an event. You can. You're too late. You put a handler on an event, you've missed it. Not with promises. Promises, because they control state, you can add handlers at any time. So the promise is complete. I can add a handler and it will be triggered immediately. So those are some of the important features. I should have probably divided them into two. This is the deciding of the outcome. It's very streamlined. Two outcomes, one chance, one value. And then the last two are the other side, who is using your promises. You can have as many as you want, and you can even add them later on. All right, I'll give you an example of a process flow. Don't ask why I picked blue and orange. Orange is for asynchronous, blue is for synchronous. No reason, right? Yeah. So just imagine this is a login flow. I'm going to check a cookie, and if there's a cookie, I'm going to get a user profile. Okay, fine, that's asynchronous. And I'm going to display that profile. There's no cookie. I'm going to check if there's a token on the device, and I'm going to create a device token. If there isn't, then log in with the token. So you can imagine that kind of flow, right? You guys are probably thinking, yeah, I can code that in my sleep, right? It's not too difficult. It's pretty straightforward. Well, now, imagine if every single bit of this is asynchronous. You're going to think, I can code that in my sleep? Probably not. You're probably thinking, oh no, that many things, all of them asynchronous, I don't want to deal with this. Well, that's where promises come in and tell you it actually doesn't matter. Yeah, with promises, what seems maybe a bit more complex because it's asynchronous actually isn't at all. All right? Now, you might think, he's pushing it. There's no such thing as so many things asynchronous. Well, sorry, but there is. This is actually the flow, the login flow of an app that we have created for Astro. And every single bit of this is asynchronous. Saving something on the device, asynchronous. Checking whether we have a token, asynchronous. Every single thing is asynchronous. So, thanks to promises, can't really see, sorry about that. But basically, this is the code that handles this entire flow. Yeah, sorry, I thought it would come up better. Well, you can't really see, but it's very straightforward. Yeah, you can actually see that we're not going like all over the place. We're not moving to the right too much. And we're talking about small elements, right? Well, it's the same here. Every single one of those boxes, you can see each function, which is that blue color. Sorry, it doesn't come out so much better. Every single function is just one line, 2 lines. Checking a token is not a big deal, but it's asynchronous, so you have to handle the fact that you're kind of waiting for an outcome. With promises, you're actually able to streamline your code and handle such a complex flow in a very nice and straightforward code. So as I was saying, promises is all about process flow. Indentation, but mostly process flow. The thing that you'll be doing most of the time is changing a value. Like you make an AJAX call. By the way, AJAX calls, even in jQuery, return a promise object, or I think they're called deferred in jQuery, not promise. If you're using Angular, it's a promise object. So you'll be getting content from the API. You need to change that before you pass it on to the next process. So changing value is one of the things that you'll be doing a lot, but it's not that interesting. Changing direction is a lot more interesting. Now, what do I mean with changing direction? I'll get to that in the next part. It's basically a rejection can be made into a success. A failure can be made into a success, or vice versa. And I'll give you a couple of examples as to why this is actually very powerful. Combining. You can combine promises very easily. Again, I'll get to some examples. You can wait for several promises. You can wait to make sure that none of the promises are successful, or you can wait for just one promise. Chaining. Chaining is more like the process that we saw just now. I need to log in. If that fails, then I do this, and then I do that, etc. Chaining is made very easy by promises. It can be a pass-through, which means, well, no matter what, just keep going. All right, that was, for example, here the save of the token. I don't care, just try and save, and if you can, it's great. If you can't, I don't care. And they allow you to have several processes in one path versus a single process in other paths. What do I mean by that? Check cookie, get profile. That's if you're successful. If you're not, you go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 processes. Okay, and that is not that simple, but with promises, it kind of is. All right. So about the changing direction. That's one thing that I really enjoyed when I started learning engineering. It was mechanical engineering, nothing to do with IT, but in the end, it's kind of the same. Is one of our professors gave us an example and said, hey, I've got this lamp, and this lamp gives you quite a little light and a lot of heat. What's the problem? Obviously, everybody in the class was like, hey, what do you mean, what's the problem? You're wasting energy and you're not getting enough light. And so the professor said, yes, but what if that lamp is meant to be used to grow plants? Then that lamp doesn't have a problem. So you cannot assume that something that sounds good is good or bad. You have to look at your current state, your current case. All right? And this is why one man's garbage, another man's gold. Because let's take a very simple example, an AJAX call. I'm writing $HTTP. I write a lot of Angular these days. So let's take an AJAX call. You can get various status from the API. You can get a 200, all good, and then you can get for 4, for 3s, 500s. Okay, I put them, obviously, green 200 and red for the failures. Now this is true for the AJAX call, but what if I'm actually doing a login? Now, logins, if the login fails, you probably should be getting a 403, but 99% of the time you won't. You will be getting a message that tells you, no, credentials are invalid. And so, what seemed to be good, because it was a 200, well, if it says status okay, then yes, it is good. But what if it says status not okay? What if the API tells me invalid credentials? So this is an example of, this one is extremely obvious. So you're probably thinking, an example of good becomes failure, all right? So to do that in promises, well, we would be using, again, I'm quoting Angular first, $q.reject, if we want to reject something that was successful, or in ES6, promise.reject. Now let's get to an example which might be slightly less obvious. Same call, same AJAX call. 200 sounds like success, the rest sounds like a failure. But what if what I'm trying to do is to figure out whether a domain is available? So if I want to know whether this particular domain is available, is a 200 a good thing? No, it's not, because I want the domain to be available. So 200 means there is a website there. It's already taken. So 200 is actually a failure. A 403 is definitely a failure, because it means somebody checked my credentials, and a 500 is probably a failure as well. So this is an example where the 404 is actually what I want, because my company, my website, what they do is I type a domain name, and I'm supposed to say, yes, this domain is available, buy it. Okay, so this is an example of the red one here that becomes a success. So this is something that promises do extremely well. Each of those boxes will be a promise. Okay, this box here is a promise. And that promise for itself will say, well, I think I'm successful. But the next process will say, well, you think you're successful, but you're not. You're actually a failure because you gave me the 200, and I wanted the domain to not be available. So this is one thing that you can do with promises extremely easily, and that's actually one of the strongest things that you can do with it. Combining. So this was actually one of my very, very first encounter with promises. I had to load a YouTube player, which, as you know, takes some time, and then it triggers an event that says player ready. And at the same time, I had to load the ID of the movie I wanted to play from an API. That might not be a big deal, but sometimes the YouTube player would be faster, sometimes the API would be faster. And so I had to create a token to say, okay, both are ready, etc. Well, promises streamline that. They make it possible for you to say, I don't care which one finishes first. All I care about is when both of them are ready, when both of them are done, then only you continue. All right. So what I mean is, this is YouTube player took a long time, movie didn't, and the next time you load the page, it could be exactly the other way around. You could have the YouTube player immediately ready, and the movie ID not yet loaded from an API. Again, this is two promises. No big deal. What if it's 3? What if it's 5 things that you have to wait for? So promises allow you to do that extremely easily. Again, Angular, $q.all, or in ES6, promise.all. All you need to do is to pass an array of things and say, I want all of them to be done, then only you continue. Right? So they really allow for great control in that sense. Chaining, I've mentioned chaining before, that's also a very, very common one, which will be, well, I want to log in. When you're done with login, then only I want you to get the user profile, and then I want you to save the username, and then I want you to do this, and then I want you to do that. And just when I speak, you can hear it. It's then do this, then do that. And so promises allow you to do that. And you won't get indentation, like crazy indentation or anything. And each of those boxes, being a promise, can actually be used in several places in your app. Okay, so you can say, well, login, I want to use it in 10 different components, whether they are React components, web components, anything. You want to know the state of that login. So, very simple way to do that in promises is to return the next process. That's all you need to do. And then it will just follow, follow, follow until you give it a synchronous thing to do, and then it'll be basically stuff. It'll just be like, okay, I'm done. One more thing that it allows you to do is to make things asynchronous. I'll get to why we want to do that in a second. No, that's wrong. That's supposed to be asynchronous. That's supposed to be synchronous. So asynchronous, I log in. I send my credentials to an API, and then I receive that in the browser, and I save my username to local storage. Been to AliExpress or any of those websites. Even when you're not logged in, it says, hi Matt, it says, hi your name, yeah, because it keeps it in storage. just to be more friendly. But the moment you want to buy, you actually do the login. So this is clearly asynchronous, and this is clearly synchronous. Well, one thing that promises allow you to do is to say no. Because now I'm not scared of asynchronous anymore, I want both of these things to be asynchronous. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to pretend that local storage is asynchronous? It's very simple, because local storage might be the thing right now, it might be cookies, but index DBs are coming, web DBs are coming, and they are asynchronous. So if you're going to write code for local storage, which is synchronous, the day your boss comes and says, hey, let's use index DB, you have to change your code to adapt to something asynchronous. So why not from the start assume that this is asynchronous? Because now we don't need to worry about those anymore. They're not scary at all because you have promises. So why do we want to do that? Making something synchronous appear asynchronous is very easy, super simple. However, making something asynchronous appear synchronous, now that's very hard. Okay, so it's better to go and say, hey, let's just make everything asynchronous, or at least pretend that it's asynchronous. So if one day we need to change, it doesn't matter what you're going to give me, it doesn't matter if you switch to IndexedDB or if you switch to local storage, which is synchronous, I'm just going to go and pretend that everything is asynchronous. So this is done very easily in Angular using $q.when, and in ES6 promises using promise.resolve. By the way, what does an ES6 promise object look like? Since I've been talking about promises a lot. You can get a promise object in the console right now. You can open your Chrome and get it. Just like promise.resolve, for example. That's the easiest way to get one. So a promise object, this is what it gives you. I don't know how familiar you are with ES6 yet. Internal slots? Sure. Yeah. So those are kind of like private variable if you want. Don't get angry if you think it's a bit different. It is. But those are kind of like private variables. So you see those two square brackets around the promise status. So internally, the promise object keeps a status. Is it fulfilled? Is it done? Is it complete? Or is it just pending? And a value. But you can't access that. Yeah, I'm typing here like a equals promise blah blah blah. I'm typing a dot to let Chrome show me what I can access. You cannot access the status, yeah, because you're not supposed to. If you do, something is not right in the way you are understanding promises. Okay. What it does have is it has a catch and then functions which allow you to say what to do next. What do I do when I'm successful? What do I do when I fail? All right, for the rest, doesn't really matter. Okay, so yeah, just a good example of internal slots if you haven't seen any yet. All right, now one of the first things that happened when we had our promise, like the last time we had a training on promises, was one of the first things somebody asked was, but how about events? And so I'm going to say promise versus events, like put them opposed to each other, but they're not really. Promises are single chance where events can happen several times. Okay? They are single value where events can pass several values. You have only two possible outcomes. In an event, it's not really an outcome, it just happens. I could have one outcome, but basically when the event triggers, the function that you set triggers. If you want more outcomes, you listen to more events. Yeah, like on stop, on load, on all these things. Promises keep state. Yeah, so you can't change a promise. If it's done, it's done. If it's successful, it's successful. If it's failure, it's failure. On events, if you missed it, it's too bad. It's gone. Yes, it doesn't linger around for you to wait. Maybe with a few exceptions, if some of you deal with Cordova from Gap. Device ready, that's one which is actually not really an event. It's very much more like a promise, because once it's triggered, if you add callbacks to it, they will trigger immediately. Yeah, so that's actually a fake event. Promise is an object. Yeah, a promise is an object, so you can actually put it into whether it's going to be a module in ES6 or whether it's going to be a service in Angular, and you can just reuse that. Yeah. Whereas for events, you'll be adding listeners onto the objects. Yeah. So you'll be saying, well, this DOM element, I want to listen to that event. Right. Again, I put promises versus events here, but I'm going to tone that down. Yeah, it's not a competition between the two. So when do I use promises? When do I use events? Well, I have this like small checklist. After a while, it comes quite naturally. But are you looking at something that happens once, or is it repeated? Okay. For example, let's think about the YouTube player that I was talking about. It's not going to load 20 times. It's only going to load once. However, it's going to tell you that it's playing many times, right? So that's one of the first things you ask yourself. The second is, does it happen at unexpected time? Now, unexpected and we don't really know how long it takes, those are two different things. A promise is part of a flow. I trigger something and I'm expecting that the outcome will come to me. Whereas what I mean with unexpected is a user clicking. You're not waiting for a user to click. You're not saying, I'm waiting for you to click, and then when you click, you go like, yay, we're done. No, you actually have no idea whether they're going to click or when they're going to click. So that's unexpected. So that's events. That's not promise. Do we need to keep the state, or does the outcome change? Again, similar example, clicking, or the YouTube player. When the YouTube player is loaded, that's a state. It's loaded, done, let's get on with our lives. Whereas when it plays and it tells us, I'm at 1 minute, I'm at 1 minute 20, that changes every time. So that's another way to know whether to use promises or events. And do we need to combine them in a flow? Because events, combining them, that's a bit of a pain. So the moment you see a flow, like you start a flow and you expect it to end, even though you don't know how long it will take, but you know it's going to end, that is a big, big flag that says promise, use promises. So who uses promises? Well, jQuery and tried with the deferred object. Angular uses promises extremely heavily. Node, there's definitely a few implementations. WhenJS, Q, obviously. They used to be part of event emitters, but then it was separated because events have their place, they do their job, and promises do their job. They're different. Ionic, obviously, because it's Angular based, and your browser actually uses promises. If you, as I mentioned just now, if you actually were to open your browser, you would see that. But all of this, who actually is using promises? To me, all of that doesn't really matter, because the exciting news is that promises are implemented in ES6. You can like whichever framework that you want right now. You prefer Angular, you prefer Knockout, React, anything that you want. One thing that is not going away is ES6. Okay, so we're all going to code in ES6 very soon, and ES6 implements promises. So that's why promises are definitely a topic that you're going to learn. Talking of learning, how can you learn promises? Well, it's available in most browsers. I took this table from the Mozilla, the MDN website. Chrome definitely has it. Firefox has it. I know.
Very surprised. That was the only one I was.
Yeah. Nope. Opera, Safari, and Edge, it says yes. So I don't really know what that means, but I guess it means yes. So if you want to learn promises and you want to just play around a little bit, one good thing to do is there is one API that actually returns a promise already, only available in Chrome, but it's get battery status. So if you want to open your browsers and you do navigator.get battery status, boom, you have a promise. So you can use that. It's not going to take you very far in learning, because it actually never fails. No matter what, it gives you a promise. A successful promise that's not going to take you very far. That's it. If you really want to learn promises, create an Angular app or an Ionic app. The Angular V1, not talking about V2, Angular V1 promises are so close to what is now in ES6. And why I don't even mention V2, because V2 promises are ES6 promises. You know, Angular's mindset is not to try and build stuff just for fun. If ES6 has promises, they don't see a reason to create their own promises. Okay, so basically, Angular V2 is going to have promises, right? So just create an Angular app or an Ionic app. You can have some fun with it, at least visually it's nice and everything. I will share those two links. The first one is an excellent article about ES6 promises. Second one, it's a bit of self-advertising. This is actually what we did 2 years ago together. The talk on promises, it's 1 hour on promises. The quality of the video is absolutely horrible. You barely can hear me, but it's been very successful. It's got like 80 ups and no downs. People have used it to actually understand promises, so I hope you can check it out and you will like it, despite the video being horrible. So that's how you can learn promises if you are interested and really, believe me, you will use them. So don't just go and say, maybe. No, you will use promises, there's no doubt about it. And that's all, yeah. It's just to keep you busy during the Q&A if you want to get something to read. So we have a quick Q&A session if you have any questions. Yes?
So an often-cited problem with promises is that you can't cancel them.
Yes.
So how do you deal with that effect?
Well, so that's where your flow, that's where you're talking about flow. Because if there's a potential cancellation, that cancellation should be the rejection of your promise. So there is no, it's not that you can't cancel them, it's that you should have a promise whose cancellation is the failure. That's the failure of your promise. So you can use that for AJAX calls. Yes, probably one of your things you're thinking about. Yeah, AJAX calls, you want to cancel it. So you can actually basically say, well, if somebody says, I don't want this call to continue, you can just make sure that that is represented by the rejection of the promise. But it's not really true that you can't cancel it. Cancel is a...
I'm going to be canceling in the sense that if you don't care about it anymore, it will still run your cache.
It will still run your LAN or your cache, yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
So you can't cancel what you've already attached to the promise, right?
No, which is where that just means that your flow, you need to reconsider your flow.
Yeah,
if there's a potential,
add that extra.
So you're basically adding a cancellation promise. So
Like a guard clause in the cache.
yeah, because if you think about it, in terms of flow, right? That's what your flow is. You could have I start and I don't want to finish. So that's one of your outcomes. It's not. Yes.
You answer the questions?
Yes.
Okay. Can we nest promises, like promise within promise, so that?
Yes. Yeah, that's how you chain promises. So if you have a promise and in the then callback you return a promise, it will basically say, oh, that's chaining. You can actually write code that looks exactly like this with promises. You can. But the whole purpose is this step 2, if it's a promise, then step 3 doesn't need to be inside the step 2. It can be outside. And it basically represents what's up next. So yes, very much.
And also like about the features, were they implemented in JavaScript or were they?
No. That was an old language. They didn't even ask me. Like, I'm not even sure which ones. But no, they were not. I think there is a framework or two that have some analytical features.
Sorry?
In JavaScript, I think there are a few frameworks that had some analytical features. But it's not meant to be what I meant to be. Those ones, this is from different languages.
To get value out of the promise object, we have to use a handler, right?
Yes.
Is there a way that not to use a handler, but you can get the value out of the promise object?
Well, so the moment, not 100% sure I understand, but so here, for example, by doing this, you're just passing the value and saying this is the outcome of the promise. But for you to actually use that, you have to have a handler, because the whole point is do this, and when you're done, do something else.
Yeah.
So you have to have a callback, right? You can't just say, and now do this, right? You have to say, when you're done, then do that. So for that, you have to pass a function.
So it's impossible to turn from asynchronous back to synchronous.
No, you can't do that. No. Which is why, from the start, which is why I said just make it asynchronous. As long as you know, okay, this is asynchronous, you can deal with it perfectly fine. If you want to switch back to synchronous, like actually switch back, then you're going to have to rewrite your code here. But that's the purpose here, is that if you want to switch from synchronous to asynchronous, you have to write code. If you want to switch from asynchronous to synchronous, you also have to write code. By doing this, you're basically saying, I'm going to stick to asynchronous, even though some of the stuff are actually synchronous.
Like, I can think of an example in the engine router. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-hmm.
There is a resolve function, right, where you can return a promise object and it gets resolved and becomes a value that gets injected to the. So yeah, how is that possible?
Because
how can we
in your controller, because you're talking about a controller, right? The controller receives that in dependency injection, right? But the controller is a callback. That function, that callback, that controller constructor function gets called after the other promises are done. So it is a handler. It is a handler. It just waits for all the promises to be done, and then it passes them along. At least in the normal router, in the UI router, you can actually do more complex stuff. But in the end, your Angular.controller blah 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 is a function, right? So that is your handler. And it's actually a handler.
I just want to mention, like I thought of ask, have you tried async and wait?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. That's like one of the cool things about it.
Yeah. Similar stuff. What I like about promises is it gives you an object.
But it is promises.
Yeah. That's why I like about promises. It gives you an object that you can just keep and just use that in various places.
Sorry, have you used Bluebird? Sorry, Bluebird. Have you used Bluebird?
No.
Yeah, someone said.
All right, another one.
Sorry.
All right, come try them all. Right? There are too many implementations anyway. But at least with this, you have your .then, you have your .catch. That's what ES6 does. So if you pick any implementation right now that does .then and .catch, you're safe. Whatever you're learning is going to work with ES6.
Right. Thank you for the talk.
Sorry for not showing more code. Show more code.
No problem.
I'll share those two links, and I'll also share, because we had a GitHub repo for that talk that we had. I'll share that. You'll see a lot of actual practical examples as to why we want to use promises.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is a really good talk. In the previous JavaScript meetup, we also talked about the features that ES6 and ES7 brought up. So I think this is a really good overview of the implementation that you can use. I mean, the practical stuff that you can do with promises. Just a little bit of a story of me and promises. I was one of the few guys in the beginning that says, man, what's promises? Nothing big about it, right? So I was like looking at it and says, no, promises is just like a fancy event emitter thing. Then I went back to my async. I love the async. You know the library async? Yeah. Then I looked at my code and I realized that, oh my god, what kind of code is this? There's just like layers after layers of complexity. I didn't have a pyramid of do. A callback pyramid of do. I solved it by creating a different kind of doomsday structure called async. But it wasn't after a while that I looked at promises that it solved all of my problems. And the best part about it is that promises is a stepping stone for ES7's currency primitives. And the best thing about all these things is all built into a language. So that's why I'm saying like JavaScript is maturing. It used to be a language everybody loves it. So now JavaScript is something that everybody has to use. Okay. So yeah, once again, snacks, drinks, and cats. Cats. Right, so 5 minutes while we set up next talk. Uptight meetup. That's how to do it.
Silos.
Come on, guys. Good up, man. How are you guys doing? Alright, so I have less code than you, and I have less slides than you. Alright, so this should be fun, I promise. Okay, yes. Anybody uses Meteor?
No, not yet, considering.
Not yet? Okay, has anybody tried it?
Uh,
Alright, I like it. How did you find it? Yeah?
Okay, so I had issues accepting that.
Just reading the manuals.
If I'm working with other APIs,
Yeah.
I have like my own API in the middle.
That's very true. I'll get to that in a second because a bit about me. My name is Hassan Ahmed. People just call me Has because it's easier to pronounce. Okay, that's me on the interweb. Almost anywhere. I created this name a long time ago. Regret it, but then now the description just comes out. I just come out, so it's okay. So I elected to keep it, so I use mostly Rails and JavaScript. Okay, and I like to dabble in new stuff, so Meteor seemed very interesting until recently. Which I'll come to that. Wait, we skip this. Alright, so what is Meteor? Okay, so a lot of times Meteor gets compared to something like Angular or Ember or Knockout and everything, but it is not really close. Okay, because the first thing about Meteor is that it's a full stack framework. Okay, so you've got the server, the client, the database, all meshed up in together. Okay, so it's kind of sort of like a platform. Okay, and the Meteor platform is very big. There's like things that you can do testing, you can do hosting. It is incredible. With very few lines of code, you can get up and coming with pretty well unconstructed apps. Not good. All right, but then the app looks impressive. You can get a lot done with very, very little code. Okay, so that's a big plus. Okay. Another thing that's great about it is that the APIs that you get to call on the server and on the client are exactly the same. All right, so there's a lot of hate on the framework. I get it. It shouldn't be this way. It gets you a lot of really nasty looking code. Okay, but then you have to watch out. So if you let yourself write shitty code, you're gonna end up with a shitty app. All right. And a lot of it are based on subscriptions. So one thing about Meteor that makes it really interesting is that out of the box it comes with a lot of subscriptions that you can subscribe to data that changes in real time. And many users who are looking at the same data get instantaneous update on their data. So it looks phenomenally impressive without you writing any code. Okay, so it gets you a lot of productivity. Okay, but there's a lot of drawbacks to it. The app could get really tangled with a lot of code really quickly. Okay, so it's gonna take you a while before you get to writing nice looking code. Okay, so but this is for something like a prototype. It's very good for that. It is good for trying to get something up in a hackathon. It's amazing for that. Okay, and if you're really into it, okay, there's a lot to study about Meteor. There's more than just getting up. It's very good to get started quickly immediately. Okay, but then you have to expand a lot of knowledge to get writing a good app in Meteor. And a lot of stick that it gets is because it's very magical. I laughed at this picture a lot longer than this, I promise you.
Well, why?
Yes, this is Gandalf the Cage.
Oh.
Alright, so what I'm going to talk about today is the principles of Meteor. The 7 principles of Meteor that makes it the framework that it is. Okay? First one, data on wire. Anything that you write with Meteor, okay, gets loaded onto the client. The app gets loaded onto the client. So the only thing that is being communicated back to the server is just data. Okay, and you do not have to do the same separation that you do with the front-end framework, like Ember or Angular. You do not have to handle an API. Meteor does it for you. Meteor does a lot of things for you. Second principle is that it is a single language framework. So you have the same language, almost, on the client and the server, that's for sure. And then it also uses MongoDB. So you're also getting to query it in the same domain language that you would with JavaScript. So that's a big plus. So if you have time for one technology and you want to get something, this is amazing. Okay, this has come a long way than you having to write a lot of like a JavaScript project, and then you need to do a lot of things on the server and trying to deploy an application. There's a lot to learn in web development. Okay, but if you want to get a good prototype, a strong prototype, something quick, I would recommend it. Alright, third one. So this is very, very interesting. Okay, at the same time it is difficult to comprehend, especially for me, because you know, like not the most technical of developers. But Meteor has a MongoDB implemented, and also on the client, you have a mini Mongo distribution. Okay, that gets the data out for you. And then once it gets onto mini Mongo, and then only then it goes to the server. So the user does not see like the time that it takes as for it to get written into the database. Okay, so it looks amazing. Things are just popping out, data flying everywhere. Okay, so it's pretty cool. And that helps a lot with latency compensation. So this makes your app looks like it is just loading all the time. You know, it's like there's nothing wrong with the internet. You know, your office Wi-Fi doesn't suck. It's pretty cool. Okay. And another thing about latency compensation, not only does the performance of the app matter, it's like the user experience. It just generates a really good user experience for your users, because they do not see a lot of the things that they would in a more traditional web application. Okay, so you wouldn't want to show as too many loaders and like page sequences. Okay, so because you have everything on the client already loaded, right? All right. Number 5. Oh, by the way, I did not come up with this list myself. Joke, guys. All right. Full stack reactivity. All right. So the reactivity on Meteor does not only happen on the client, it happens also on the server and also with the database layer. So if two users are logged into the same system, they look at the same thing, okay, both of them get the exact same reactivity happening at the same. Please go ahead.
What's reactivity?
Oh, like data just loads. Okay, so if somebody adds something, have you seen like a Trello?
Sure.
When somebody moves a card?
Okay.
Yeah, so that kind of reactivity.
Not like React already.
Oh, no, it has nothing to do with
Asana.
Yeah, so it's just like the reactivity of the application. So that is one of the primary focuses of a Meteor. Okay, so like the front-end interaction with the user.
So it's all synchronized, the process itself?
Yes. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. All right, so embracing the ecosystem. So that's one of the mantras that Meteor.js tries to accommodate. Okay, so you can still use a lot of the things that you also use today. So it doesn't mean that you cannot put in jQuery. It doesn't mean that you cannot use anything that you're currently using. You can use external APIs, but it makes it a lot less Meteor. So it's like there are a lot of like best practices and standards that you would like to write your code with. Okay, it's not just I'm gonna plug in everything and it's just gonna work. It's like I take that. Okay, simplicity. So a lot of the things that you do with Meteor, they are focused on simplicity. How fast can I get
like a user signed in, right? Okay, so you always have the same things over and over again. Okay, there are a lot of Meteor packages that do a lot of things for you. Okay, the community is great. The platform is really well funded. They raised about a bunch of monies, okay, like a few years ago, and they only use this money for development. Fantastic. Okay, but it has not picked up as well as people would imagine. And because there are a lot of drawbacks onto the platform. So right now, the only officially supported database is MongoDB. Okay, and that comes at a, like and a lot of constraint. It adds constraint to picking something. All right, and yeah, wanted to say, yes, okay. So the thing that I wanted to say about is that I do not like Meteor. Yeah, really. That's it, yeah. You get a lot of things done quickly with it, but at the same time, really, code gets tangled really quickly, especially when you're working with a lot of developers, because the API gets, like you can call it on the client and on the server the same way. So if you do not have like a strong skill set, if you do not have like strong foundation, you're gonna get with an app that 3 weeks later, nobody knows what's going on. Okay, yeah, and at the same, like a client and server like separation can be done in the same file. Just to, like the only distinction is that an if statement. If Meteor is client, all code goes inside. If Meteor is server, all code goes inside. Okay, so there are a lot of best practices, but you have to take time out to study, learn, and interact with other developers that are doing Meteor. Okay, but then, if you need something quick, you need a mid-sized application that you want to get out quickly. This is the end. Question, please.
Can you give some specific? Because you're talking very general.
Yeah, okay.
On the negative side.
Okay, so
very
it's not very common. Yeah, sorry, what was that?
Yeah, can you give a very specific example of the negative thing that you're talking about?
Oh yeah. So like, especially when writing the code, constructing the code, okay, it gets very tangled really quickly. Okay, because you can do a database save, like you can save into the database, you can write into it on the client and on the server. Do you see a lot of PHP happiness? Sorry?
PHP the same place where it server design.
Yeah, so that ends up with a lot of, like a very messy code. So especially if you're like a beginner, if you're coming up to try to learn how to develop, it's very easy to do something, but at the same time, it's very easy to do it the wrong way.
So I don't understand your comment about that.
Sure.
You are talking about synchronizing, syncing.
Yes.
Mini Mongo and server Mongo.
Yeah.
Is that the problem you're talking
That's
about?
not the problem, because Meteor.js does that for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do not have to. Yeah, so you do not have to go out and write code to try to synchronize that. Okay, but you can call it anywhere. So the code construction, the way that you would, design how you write your code, can get mixed up.
Well, what do you mean?
I'm sorry, I don't know how.
That's correct. I don't understand. When you say
Because you can write any part of the code to do anything, anywhere, at any event.
Does it cause confusion when you're like debugging?
Yes, yeah. So it's a huge confusion while you're debugging. It causes like a huge confusion when somebody else looks at the code and they try to come in and try to look at your code, try to build on it.
I mean, if you're talking about team development,
Yes.
that will happen if you don't have your team discussion on this, right?
Fair
That
enough.
can happen anywhere, anybody in any platform. So why is it specific on?
Because it's easier to do it with Meteor. I will show you afterwards. I'll show you like a project.
What are the security implications? Like the database records can be accessed from the console log?
Yes. So that is a huge database concern and security concern, and it should be turned off in production.
Okay,
You can turn it.
Yes. So only just like dabble with it, but it is all
Yeah.
It's a plugin, right? You can turn off insecure and auto.
Yeah. So as soon as you turn off the insecure mode, then that goes away.
Then you can do the normal.
Yes. Yeah. So you don't have it like on the front end. On the
I have a question. I understand that Meteor.js is probably not good for like marriage material and long-term relationships.
Yeah, sure.
Long-term relationships. Yeah, wait. One night stand. I mean, but my question is, the problem with Meteor.js, is it because it is too opinionated or because it's hard to maintain code written in Meteor.js?
It is too opinionated in the terms of what technologies it gets built on. Okay, that's for sure. But at the same time, it's not opinionated at all in terms of how you structure your code. Okay, you can separate it out into something like based on functions. There are Meteor reads like how you structure your folders. Okay, because you can structure them in folders based on regular conventions like client, server, library, which gets called on first. Okay, but at the same time, you can plug in anything anywhere.
Okay, so is it safe to say that because there are a lot of web frameworks that it's really simple to set up, it provides a lot of boilerplates and features that you don't have to re-implement yourself. And during hackathons, a lot of people use these things as a prototyping method, right? But the good thing about these kind of frameworks is that after you're done with the prototyping, there are a lot of components that you can reuse in order to build the actual system itself.
Fair.
So my concern with Meteor.js is that, which is also my question,
Yes.
is Meteor.js too opinionated to a point where you can't move away from it without changing or re-implementing a lot of features? Can we use it as a prototyping tool, but also have the comfort of knowing that when we want to move to our actual development of the product itself, we won't have to rewrite the entire thing?
You have to rewrite the entire
And what do you mean by that?
Wait, no, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
When you say you have to rewrite the whole thing, what do you mean by that?
So you can't take components out that you've already developed because you're developing it on Meteor APIs. Okay, so these are not just JavaScript calls that you're making. You're also learning with the framework and the API calls that the frameworks give you. Okay, so like to insert into a database. Okay, that's not just any ORM. That's Meteor specific. Does that make sense?
You can plug in any helpers.
Sure.
Right, and any helpers can be structured with whether it's a Postgres, SQL, or whatever, right?
But you lose the reactivity that it gives you with MongoDB.
So it's a design issue, right? So you balance what you want to get done.
Fair enough, but if you're trying to like slide the other way around, then you're losing a lot of things that Meteor gives you. Okay, so then why pick Meteor to begin with? Does that?
Well, if I were to say, all right, if I'm going to design with MongoDB to give me my reactivity first, right? But in real life, you can't get that type of reactivity.
Okay.
Right, and you're going to forecast that when you scale. So you're going to base it on a bigger database or something like that.
Sure.
And you need, say, your asset thing or whatever that you need to do. That is restructuring your API call specific for that.
Okay, but that comes back to this question. Like, can you just plug it out as a component and to reuse it in an application?
I guess if you're using helpers, you could.
No, I think I kind of understand that part, because Meteor, if you're a very opinionated framework, you tend to have things that are done in a certain way. So these things are done in a certain way. It might involve a lot of components working together in tandem. So if you want to take away that reactivity and plug it into another system, in another database or whatsoever, it's not as easy as just taking it out, because then you have a lot of dependencies that you have to lift up at the same time. And by the end of the day, when you finally find the entire dependency chain, that entire dependency chain might be called Meteor.js. You can just take away, put it somewhere. So, like you say, I mean, it is a design issue, but the design issue exists inside Meteor.js in the sense that everything is too tightly coupled together, and you can't modularize specific portions of it to your liking.
The way I understand it is quite different, because let's say on a specific variable or a data set, an array, and that is called within a helper function, which then calls the database to do the find. In MongoDB is a find, then send back an array. How is that different from doing an SQL call?
Well,
and that shields your database call thingy, right?
I guess if you're really trying to build things with Meteor with using so many helpers so you can move it up eventually, then you definitely would. But I think you lose a lot of the productivity that Meteor gives you and a lot of the Meteor way, so to say.
I have a question for you. I mean, it sounds to me like you built something in Meteor already, and this comes to you like a shock.
No. That is not. I'm just having a difference of opinion in terms of the helper is a way of getting a data set back to the particular function that requires it.
Fair.
And there's a meaning to that, right? Okay. So when you call it as an object, as far as that application call is an object. Okay. So I don't see how that if I were to make a SQL call and binds it to that object, and another part of Meteor calls it, why should it be different?
I think a good example would be a client-side storage in terms of data updates and reactivity. So this is something that I played around in the past, not specifically from Meteor.js, but I actually ran into the same problems as what you mentioned just now, right? So what happens is that there's a client-side storage in the browser itself, and there's a database that is in there. So between the client storage and the database, there's a bunch of automated events going on that synchronizes these two databases. So when you have 10 clients, there will be 10 storages, and these 10 storages will try to synchronize itself with the database itself. Yeah. So at the same time, the client code has update, basically CRUD methods, read, update, and delete, right? So this happens. This modifies the operations inside the client-side database, which gets synchronized into the DB. So these things are, I would assume, that's provided by Meteor.js as a way to optimize the entire reactivity thing, so that anything that happens in the database, it shows up on the client side. But the problem with this is that you can't take the entire infrastructure, this architecture, and lift it to another place, because the way it's designed is written in a way that it's too tightly coupled, that it's hard for you to remove it. Or even certain data structures that we standardized data structures that only exist in Meteor.js. Once you lift that infrastructure up, you have to re-implement not only the infrastructure you have to re-implement the data structures as well. So it becomes a really messy thing for you to move away. So I'm guessing that could be the same thing for Meteor.js as well.
It's a lot of the same here.
Yeah, that's why helpers and all that. Yeah, helpers itself sounds like it could be a solution, but sometimes it's just too much of a clusterfuck, so to say. Yeah. So.
Please, do you have anything running production?
No production. Because I could not go far enough without thinking like this is going to be a problem. It's true.
Are there any large scale examples online?
There are like several Malaysian companies that are building straight off of Meteor. So Meteor comes with this other great thing is that you can generate a mobile app out of without writing any code, just like a terminal stuff. Okay, so that's what they do. But the app becomes a bit bigger than it usually would, especially with the Cordova application.
Is it just like within a web app or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we'll wrap up this talk. Thanks a lot for attending.
You're welcome. I strive for controversy.
So,
it's not controversy, it's learning.
Sure, of course. Thanks so much.
So I hope you guys had a great time today, and I hope that you guys like the talks and all that. Again, just to put it out there, the vision is to eventually build up to more than this place. So this, I hope that will be our regular meetup area. Eventually, what we want to do is to do something that's in the actual conference hall. you have been to JSDC Taiwan, which I've been to twice, if you've been there, they use lecture halls. It's really fun lecture hall because every seat has this thing where you have a mic, you have a button there. If you have questions, just press your number, you show up, and you talk through the mic. It's like a parliament hall kind of thing. Super cool, right? I don't think we have this thing in our universities here, or if there is, it's very hard to access. But the point is this: eventually we will have to get there. There's no excuse that in Thailand and Singapore there's so many tech-related events and people are so close, even though the country is big. I mean, not big, but even though there are a lot of companies spread out, the community is very tight because of all these events. So the vision that we have here with the JavaScript developers in Malaysia, the group, to eventually grow to a point where we will be able to unite everybody through these events. And I would highly recommend you guys, if you have employers that are looking for JavaScript talent, ask them to join our group, our Facebook group, because we post job posting there specifically for JavaScript courses. In the past, there's not a lot of demand for JavaScript developers, mainly because JavaScript is like something that you happen to know and you don't want to admit it. You don't want to admit that you enjoy the language. But it's moved from this basement up to the hall. So now it's time where there's actually a market for professional, like people, developers that are specialized in JavaScript. There's actually a market there. It's growing, but it's there. So hopefully by next year, with you guys coming consistently to these meetups and all that, we'll be able to move to a bigger event, which eventually will be JavaScript Developers Conference, right? That's our goal. But still, we're going to commit to organizing these kind of meetups every month. We might not be able to find speakers, like awesome speakers like today, every time, but at least when you come here, there will be beer, I hope. At least, right? But the point is this, the more meetups we do, we share the technologies that we use, and it's important because we know what other people are using, and they might give us ideas that we don't know yet, right? So, yep, really happy for you guys to be here. I hope to see you guys again. Yes.
I spoke to a couple of guys, and they saw the speakers.
Yeah.
They're like, is this too advanced?
That's a good question. Actually, would you guys like something more simple? Is it something that's worth pursuing? Maybe we have a workshop, we have a meetup focused entirely on the workshop, and then an actual meetup where we share this kind of stuff. So, because what you're talking about, that falls under evangelists for JavaScript. And maybe you want to do it, but I'm not sure if we can find the time or the resources to evangelize JavaScript. But that's a really good idea. We will definitely look into it actually. So, yeah.
On the same note, like if I can explain what we're doing in the Singapore side, because it's really interesting to see what's happening here. But we have basically like beginners that are like just learning JavaScript, organizing their own like book clubs and stuff. So they go like, here's a book that teaches me how to do like JavaScript or these kind of or like ebooks and stuff that are freely available or courses. And they just like organize themselves. So last night I was at Hackerspace and there was like 30 people there, all learning JavaScript like for the first time. They're non-developers or developers in other languages, and they want to learn more JavaScript. And like all these people posted on meetup.com or Facebook or something like that. People show up and like you just keep organizing it, do consistently, like every month or every week or whatever format, and then it'll grow. And like after about a year, it'll be like.
Yeah, actually, this reminds me of another series of events in Taiwan. They had this Docker workshops. You guys know about Docker? It's actually this Docker workshop, which is organized by the same people that organize the GSDC. They do it I think it's every month or so, right? But the cool thing is that people that want to learn about Docker, they will come to those workshops with their laptops and everything, and there will be a person guiding them through the steps of how to set their containers, and they will like exercises on, hey, it's time for you to create your own containers and all that. So I think it's actually something I'm looking for. Okay, we'll post up any of your thoughts and your suggestions. Please post it up on JavaScript Developers Group of Malaysia. Because right now we tend to have kind of a bit of a slowdown in terms of news and all that. But we'll try to keep the momentum going. Yeah.
That's why I'm interested in meetup, because it gives you the instant gratification of Python.
Okay.
Right. And that's what you want early adopters to do. Yeah. And then once you get a hook, it's like, okay, show them the other stuff. Yeah. So I'm not totally convinced it's a week by itself, because it's still very new. I mean, it's still very new.
Which is good. That's why.
What is very new? I mean, meteor by itself. Yeah, very new.
Okay. So I think it's good that we, even though you don't like
of course,
personally, but I think it's nice that you put it on the table so that we get exposed to it and we are aware of the weaknesses or even like the potential niche that we can use it in. So I think it's good that we have these kind of discussions in our meetups. So all right, we're gonna wrap this thing up. So once again, thank you all for coming. We still have food there. So please help us finish it. We're not going to finish it ourselves. So I'll look forward to seeing you guys here, plus more people on next meetup, right? Thanks, guys.